Hey everybody, welcome aboard Motor Vessel Epic. We are just floating aimlessly out in the middle of Tampa Bay right now on a beautiful March afternoon.
It's gorgeous. We're 10 miles away from our home port in St. Pete. We're over here by Apollo Beach and Ruskin, Florida, closing in on the Hillsborough River. We're looking at the Skyway right now. We're covered in love bugs. They're everywhere.
Oh, they're crazy.
They're the worst. But anyway, if you don't know yet,
I'm Captain Butch.
and I'm First Mate Jen, and we're here to introduce our new series, Epic Stories, to you.
Yeah, with Epic Stories, we're going to share with you maritime disasters, shipwrecks, survivor stories, some of them that you might not be aware of, and others that you are. But we are pretty excited about it. We've got our first guest, Daniel Harrington, which kind of got kicked off by our video or our visit to Block Island last year.
Our last video that we released, second to last, was of us going to Block Island. And while we were there, we signed up for, we're history buffs, we love history, we love ships, and there was a Shipwrecks and Saviors history tour. And so we took the tour of the Historical Society, and then we signed up for their cemetery tour later that night, and we found out about this crazy American historical maritime disaster called the Larchmont. And we ended up emailing Daniel Harrington directly. He's told this story in the New England area. He was gracious enough to write us back. We have him as our first guest today. We learned so much from him. We're excited to share it with you.
Yep.
Daniel's the best. Shout out to Daniel for being just super knowledgeable and fun to hang out with. And we can't wait to see you on Block Island again.
Yeah, and Daniel has given a presentation on the Larchmont disaster called Remembering the Larchmont. We will have all of the links below on how to access all of this information, videos, anything that we talk about here. And so we're excited about it. We hope you're going to enjoy it. Up after the Larchmont epic story, we have one lined up with a live guest that we filmed probably a couple of years ago.
We filmed him a couple of years ago on aquaculture. Mind you, he also had a 44-foot Defeaver offshore cruiser, which was totaled in a hurricane. And we'll tell you his story. Yeah. He'll tell you his story. He was rescued by the Coast Guard.
Yeah,
it was wild.
We don't want to give away too much. It's a captivating story, real-life survivor story, going into the eye of Hurricane Ian. You don't want to miss it.
I cried. He cried. We were all angry, happy, sad together. It hit every emotion. We're super excited to bring that to you.
Yeah.
If there's any stories that you've heard about, you know about, you've experienced yourself, drop us an email, drop us a comment. You can go to refinedbywater@gmail.com, thegreatepic.com, and leave us a comment there, or just on this video, leave us a comment and we'll reach out to you directly. We're excited to hear these stories, but mostly we're excited to share them, and we're excited to share your stories as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in between the Epic Stories series, we will be sprinkling in boat tours, boat content, so we're covering all the bases, so stay tuned. I hope you really enjoy. If you do, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends. It really does help.
Share that video. Thanks, everyone.
For centuries, the sea has carried stories of disaster, survival, and mystery. From shipwrecks to unexplained vanishings, these are the stories the ocean refuses to forget. This is Epic Stories with Captain Butch and First Mate Jen. Listen on your favorite podcast platform, watch on the Great Epic YouTube channel, or visit thegreatepic.com.
A little after 10 o'clock, I'm sitting in the cabin. I'm sitting right there where you are. The boat, due to hurricane force wind and waves, rolls 90 degrees. I'm thrown across the cabin. I hit what ends up being the starboard side.
Larchmont is not Rhode Island's Titanic. Titanic is Europe's Larchmont.
The sea remembers everything. On a frozen February night off Block Island, two ships met in the dark. Not by fate, not by chance, but by a single moment that could never be taken back. What followed lasted only minutes, but its echoes have carried for more than a century. This is Epic Stories, and this is the night the Larchmont vanished.
So on the line now, we have Daniel Harrington, live from Rhode Island, here to talk about the Larchmont tragedy with us. Welcome, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Butch and Jennifer. It's great to be with you and joining you this morning, and also for reaching out to me. So I'll keep it simple. I'm a self-described recovering politician from East Providence, Rhode Island. I was on the city council, and I became a monthly columnist for the Providence Journal, belovedly referred to as the Projo here. And I presently have a day job as a securities principal for Mass Mutual. Now, in 2014, I was hired by the editor of the Providence Journal as a columnist after they published several of my unsolicited letters to the editor. And over the next 9 years, I published about 115 articles on a wide range of topics. But of all the subjects I explored, the sinking of the Larchmont haunted me throughout the years and prompted me to continue research and my passion. And the presentation I've now brought to about 100 venues in southern New England is the fruit of that haunting, and it still continues. As I told you earlier when we spoke, I can't get off the steamship. It's lured me on, and I love telling the story, and I seem to learn more and incorporate that in my presentations as I go on. So I'm happy to talk about this passion with the both of you today.
Well, thank you. And your expertise and everything, I mean, everything that we researched on the Larchmont, we kept coming back to you in your presentations, and you have lured us in now, and now we can't get off the steamships.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Well,
we love maritime history and mysteries and good stories to tell. So this is perfect. We're so happy to have you as our first guest. We're honored. We went to Block Island last year.
The first week of June we were there. I had to go out to a bachelorette party. Like, Butch was like, wait a second, I want to go out there with you. We love boats. And we ended up going to Block Island, which we linked up with the Historical Society while we were there because we're history buffs. And they happened to have a shipwrecks. It's shipwrecks and shipwrecks and saviors, I think.
Yeah, something like
anyway,
that.
it was incredible. And they told the story of the Larchmont, and we ended up doing the cemetery tour with them later that evening, which was across from Champlin's Resort where we were staying, and it was from 7 to 9 p.m., and it was just filled with, Block Island history and the residents there and how they all played a part, and it was really incredible. So thank you again for joining us, and it was awesome. We didn't think you would write us back, so I sent the initial email, and he was kind of like rolling his eyes, like, this guy's not going to get back to you. So
Really, because I was very impressed with your website and your presence on social media, so I thought the same. Wow, why are they reaching out to me? So it's good that we found one another.
yeah, thank you.
Well, we love it. We love some cross promotion and bringing our audience to you and giving them a lot of great history and knowledge from you. I think is very exciting, and it's amazing that we've got this for our first podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thrilled. Let's go.
Let's go. All right, so I guess we'll start from the beginning where it was the Cumberland.
Yes, so the Cumberland, I start my presentation with the Cumberland to a few scratching heads, and I say this ship is very important. So yes, in the early part of the 20th century, the Cumberland served Boston, Massachusetts, in particular Irish immigrants, and going to New Brunswick every day. And this ship was sleek, it was fast, it was built in Bath, Maine. It was the pride of the Eastern Steamship Company. And remember, there was no radar in those days, so one day in the early 1900s, the Cumberland in the fog of Boston just outside the harbor collides with an ugly ship with an ugly name, the Admiral Farragut. And she starts to sink, so a daring captain of the Cumberland that time, Captain Allen, decides he's not going to let it sink and release the lifeboats because he wants to preserve the ship. So he makes a daring run back to Boston Harbor where the water is shallow. And he makes it. Barely, as 200 terrified passengers run off the ship. So the Eastern Steamship Company sees the damage. She was smacked in the starboard side, right at the bow of the ship. So she was declared a total loss. She actually sank in the harbor, but she was saved because of the shallow water. So Eastern says, we're done with this ship. And for $40,000, a tidy sum in the day, but much cheaper than building a new steamship, a company based in Providence and Boston, Mass, called the Joy Line Steamship Company, named after Mr. Joy, not a description of the experience, buys the Cumberland for $40,000. In 1 month, she is repainted, repaired, and renamed. You want to guess the new name of the Cumberland? The Larchmont.
That's unbelievable. I recently worked in a shipyard, and turning a boat around in 1 month is just unbelievable. It was hard enough to turn just a basic job in the shipyard around in 1 month, let alone a full rehabilitation of a totaled vessel. That's just unreal.
Yeah, it was all about the dollar. The Joy Line was a cheap company compared to some of the steamship companies out of Fall River, for example. So it was all about the money. And Joy Line Company was a train company that was getting into the burgeoning steamship business. So yeah, they just repaired that. Labor was cheap, and it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
I
sure.
actually read an article that McVeigh was quoted saying that their staff was underpaid compared to the other markets that were around, and it was hard to keep staff on board, so they constantly changed staff. And I guess that night, the tragedy night, he didn't really know half of the staff that was there. He hadn't worked with them before.
Excellent point, Jennifer. Yes, it was kind of a steamship engines had been around, but the industry itself was fairly young, and there was a lot of drifters, and it was tough to get good help. That's why the captain was only 28 years old on the Larchmont. I mean, and he was old compared to some of the help. So yeah,
Right.
good point. Very good point that there was a lot of turnover and not a lot of expertise. Yes, but there was a name of her in the interim, and that was by the passengers and the people of New England, who instantly thought of the Larchmont as a cursed steamship, so they started to call the Larchmont, aka the Cumberland, the hoodoo ship, the cursed ship of the Joy Line, because after she becomes the Larchmont, she has several minor accidents, yet they all remembered the fate of the Cumberland and said this ship should be at the bottom of the bay. And so she was called the hoodoo ship.
And some of those were, I think it was ran aground twice, and then someone was also murdered on board in the middle of the night, and then it was a like no one ever found who did it, but I think they thought it was the pianist that was actually working aboard the ship.
Absolutely, Jennifer. The crime was never solved. His body was discovered. His name was John Hart, and he came into Providence with a bullet in his skull. Anyone want to guess the stateroom number he was in?
Oh,
202?
13.
I was
13,
gonna say lucky number 13.
I'm just throwing out random
So,
numbers.
so you can't have a number 13 guest stateroom anymore.
So it was, yes, it was a murder. She also struck a ship called the Melanson off of Brooklyn. There was a fire in her storage hole. And more comically, there was a tremendously overweight editor of a Providence paper who fell down the stairs leaving the Larchmont and broke his shoulder.
Oh my goodness.
Oh no.
And the papers of the day said he was 360 pounds or more.
Wow.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
this was the legacy of the Larchmont as she started to build before the infamous night of February 11th, 1907.
And so,
The Cumberland was 1902, and by 1907, the ship was the hoodoo ship, the Larchmont.
and so when the Larchmont was put into service with Joy Line, what was its initial route? Was it to New York City, or was it something else and then they changed it to New York City, or was it changing all the time? Do you know anything about that?
Very good question. The most popular route was to Providence to New York City for $1. If you wanted to spend an extra $1, you got your own stateroom, which was cheaper than the steamships leaving out of nearby Fall River, Mass. So that was their bread and butter route. However, I found that through research, they would never let that ship stay idle. She went to Cape Cod, to Gayhead. She went to Long Island. So yeah, they tried to keep pushing the ship, but that New York trip was popular. And it was preceded by the Larchmont Providence to New York by a ship called the Tremont, which actually burned one morning. And Captain McVeigh of the Larchmont, when he was a young pilot, actually saved 43 people's lives. So that route was well known and well traveled by the Joy Line.
Wow, that's amazing. And yeah, we read a little bit about the Tremont and the fire, and there was I guess some sensationalism on that story. I think there was something about tigers or lions on board.
Yeah.
So it's one of the best parts of my presentation, because I actually show a graphic where the World newspaper on the New York City say, quote, "Firemen battled 2 maddened beasts in the fire," and it shows lions clawing at the firemen. And the story was an absolute fabrication. There were lions on the Tremont headed to New York for the circus. Yet they died of smoke inhalation just after the ship's fire was started by a spark in the breakfast galley. And However, Captain McVeigh rescued 43 people, and one baby lioness cub was actually rescued out of the Tremont's hold. But no, there was no firemen battling the lions, but that also shows a nice tidbit of the newspapers of the day.
It sure does.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything for a good story.
And so he was recognized as a hero for that. And actually, it kind of piloted him into the career that he had with the Larchmont, correct?
Correct. It catapulted him to the head of the steamship, the Joyline, as a guy with a future. He was 26 years old, so he was quickly made captain at 28, very young. And McVeigh was proud. He was a seafaring family, Providence, Rhode Island, born in Bangor, Maine. All his dad's was a seafaring man, his grandfather. And even to today, in Rhode Island, there are McVeighs. And I served with one on the East Providence Council, so it's a very long pedigree with the family. So yeah, McVeigh became the captain of the Larchmont.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
Nice.
incredible to be that young, even though he had a good deal of experience on the water, but to have that kind of responsibility on that size of a ship. I believe the Larchmont was around 252 feet long.
Correct.
So with a lot of passengers on board, that's a lot of responsibility. And, you know, you can't learn everything in a book. It's based on experience at sea, will then help you mitigate any issues in the future. And so somebody that young, that's remarkable.
It was remarkable.
Yeah.
And so the ship was ready to do its regular passage from home port to New York City. And do you know what the receiving port was in New York City? Was it, did they?
There was a Joyline. There was a Joyline up here, down there, right in Manhattan. But that's a good question. I don't know exactly where in the topography.
I did find a photo of them at the pier.
I have one of the Tremont burning at that pier, but
Oh.
I don't know specifically. But there were many ships in that area. But that's a good question.
Yeah, and I was curious as if it went in between the mainland and Long Island, or it went out around Long Island and into Manhattan. I wasn't sure on how the actual route went.
I believe the route came out down Narragansett Bay and then went west and really shadowed the shoreline of Connecticut. So between Long Island and Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah, so in between.
Yeah.
That would make more sense. I feel like it's more protected over there.
Yeah,
You got to
absolutely.
be careful because one of the assumptions, because I'm presenting this, is that I'm a sailor or a seafaring man. I am not. I'm a columnist from
This
the
one is.
Journal, so I learn as I go.
Well, we love it. It's a good balance. You know, our background is on the water, on boats, and our audience are very well versed in boats as well. And so we've got a lot of couch captains out there as well.
I love that term, couch captains. Yes, and I'm humble before them. I see many divers at my presentations. They educate me. Although in my presentation, I actually tell people that starboard is the left, and I don't assume anything. So
I've learned that port side is the left because port is the same number of letters that left is. That's how I remember it.
Say the starboard was the left.
I think you might have said starboard was the left.
Port and starboard, yeah. See?
That's right. There's a little cheat sheet you can buy for boaters where you put it right in front of the helm and it says lift in case of an emergency, and you lift it and it says port left, starboard right.
Yeah.
I love it. You know, it's funny how the official documents of the Larchmont are filled with sea terms. Like McVeigh said, I was on the leeward side of the ship. And I had to look up terms like that. It has to do with the wind and things like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of great terminology and keywords in maritime history, and maybe we'll do a keyword every now and then.
That sounds good.
Inform
Good idea.
our audience of what that word means, like the poop deck or why is the port side. There's a lot of neat meanings behind those words. But anyways, we digress. So we'll talk about the fateful trip now. Heading out of port, and I understand the weather was pretty bad.
February 11th, 1907, around 7 p.m. because they were delayed.
Wow, you're good, gentlemen. Yeah, so we're delayed. A blizzard at very Providence in New England. It was unusual weather. As I say in my presentation, nothing is so essential in understanding the disaster of the Larchmont as the unusual weather that gripped New England. It was 2 degrees below zero, and the wind was gusting up to 45 to 50 miles per hour. Today, they wouldn't have sailed a ship, but this was the wild, wild west of the steamship days. Narragansett, once they got out of Narragansett Bay, the seas were swelling up to 20-foot waves. Can you imagine? So, but still it went, but it was an hour delayed due to snow squalls. But here's the rub. Visibility that night was perfectly clear. In the end, the weather had nothing to do with the collision, although it had everything to do with the horrific aftermath.
Yeah. That's really hard to swallow when, especially when I was reading the book, it's so graphic, what happened to these poor people. And
Yeah, and so the weather was nasty. Obviously, it must have been a cold front that just pushed through. And, a lot of the time after our cold fronts, we get that northwest wind and it clears out the air. So that probably explains why it was so clear out there, yet it was so windy, bringing in that very frigid air, which is, it's a beautiful thing out on the water. But when it's blowing like that and as cold as it is, that's quite harsh. And going through that at night too, without, I understand they didn't really have radio communication at that time, or at least those ships weren't equipped with radio communication.
It had been invented, but it didn't have a transmitter.
Exactly. So they left port. Everybody thought everything was normal besides the weather. The guests were enjoying themselves, and it was kind of like a little mini cruise ship. And the Larchmont was a side wheeler, what I've found out. So that was kind of the earlier steamship design, which later came the stern wheel steamships, but these were side wheels, which is pretty interesting.
for those that don't know what a side wheel is, can you explain that to us? Because I don't know.
So the steamship, it's a paddle wheel driven vessel rather than a propeller, and the wheels, the paddle wheels, are on the side of the ship. Where
yes, one on each side.
Yep, where the riverboat cruises you see today,
on the back of the ship.
the paddle wheel is on the back of the ship, which is a little more efficient.
Or the stern.
The stern.
Very
Correct.
good.
Right.
The heart of the steamship was the saloon. It was the place where this eclectic group of people, it's not the Titanic first class, second class, third class. This was basically people of low means looking to get out. There was some gentrified people there, but it was a cheap trip. And it brought people from all over New England.
Yeah.
And they were quite eclectic. They were from all over the world, all backgrounds, all nationalities. And I just focused in my presentation on a couple. It was unusual in that they had a young kid, 16 years old, out of North Attleboro, Mass., named Millard Franklin, who built himself the boy Houdini, and he actually did magic presentations, and he imitated Harry Houdini, the greatest celebrity of the day, and he imitated his feats, and he got work in New York. In fact, his mother was unaware of his being on the Larchmont this icy night because he was going to get a gig, and the whisper was he was going to get a contract from Harry Houdini. But more amazingly, there was a group of Salvationists, women, and 10 Salvationists, 7 of them are women from the Salvation Army that are on their way to a officers meeting in New York City. And they spontaneously performed after the boy Houdini in the saloon and sang gospel hymns to the crowd, to the heavily inebriated crowd with smoke in the rooms. Yet the crowd loved it because there were, quote, 3 very pretty girls with an acoustic guitar and an accordion. We also focused on Sadie Golub. She was a young woman from Boston who was on her way to see her sister in New York City, had just had a baby who is gravely ill.
And
then
Sadie
there
was a
Sam
dressmaker.
Yeah. And lastly, one of the passengers was Sam Lacombe, a French-Canadian boy from Manchester, New Hampshire, somewhat of a mystery, but I found him when I was digging through the Providence Journal article. Dashingly handsome. Lacombe actually worked as an acrobat in the Barnum and Bailey Circus, among other jobs, and was probably going to New York looking for that. The press did say that Lacombe, coincidentally, once survived a drowning with his brother in the rivers of New Hampshire.
See, that's the first I've heard that. I
Yeah,
couldn't
there was a
find
small
anything
article
about
on
him.
Sam surviving that. So he was quite a man, and we'll talk about him later.
That's wild.
But and the incredible part of the story, we can call it the miracle, was a man named Harris Feldman from Chicago who was on business in Rhode Island for a fraternal organization. He and his wife were from Chicago and on the ship, and Feldman had actually served in the Russian Navy. He was a Jewish man, and because of the pogroms in Russia, he had to leave. So the coincidence with Feldman is that he had previously survived a winter shipwreck on the Black Sea, of all places. That experience would prove fortuitous. So all these coincidences, the boy Houdini, the acrobat, the belle from Boston, and the shipwreck survivor of the Russian Navy would all end up together.
Wow. And so it was supposed to just be an overnight trip, right? I imagine it was probably like 10 to 12 hours total, maybe more than that. I can't remember the exact distance.
Out at 6 o'clock normally of Providence and into New York by 9 a.m. Had dinner on the Larchmont, and you were in New York for breakfast.
Wow.
Wow.
The young McVeigh, he was the master of the ship, essentially. They were underway, and there was somebody in charge of helming the vessel.
Anson?
Great recall. Very important point. The captain didn't sit there and steer the ship. That was the pilot's job. And the pilot was 32-year-old John Anson, also of Providence. Anson was 1 week away from being married, and he was somewhat of a hot dog. He was very aggressive, and he was running the Larchmont. It was his ship, and he was going fast, and you can see where that's going.
Yeah. Was there somebody else in the pilot house with them?
The quartermaster.
Quartermaster James Sables.
So I understand McVeigh checks on things in the pilot house, goes down below, checks on guests, probably goes down to his cabin, writes notes or whatever. And apparently they weren't alone out at sea.
No, that was very heavily trafficked. I call it Route 95. New Englanders know that. That's where all the steamships were. Ships going back and forth, and they all patrolled and watched out for each other by the infamous bow and stern lights. And as they had just rounded Jamestown, Rhode Island, pilot Anson saw the bow and stern's lights of a coal-laden steamer out of New Jersey called the Harry Knowlton. The two ships would pass closely by, but he did nothing.
Yeah, so it from what I understand, they were essentially on a collision course. The Harry Knowlton was around 120-foot schooner, 3-masted schooner.
Shorter than the Larchmont, very good.
And 33 feet wide.
Yeah, and they were under sail, so they were not under power. So you've got the Larchmont under power, the Knowlton heading in the opposite direction under sail, and they were essentially on a collision course. And what really happened next?
So I reveal this fact at the end of my lecture because most of the people attending aren't like you. They don't understand the laws of the sea. Most of the seafaring men and women that come to my presentation do, and that's this. Steamboats were required and are required today to yield the right-of-way to sailing ships. So both captains assumed the vessels would pass fairly close to one another, but Captain Haley of the Knowlton, a father of 15, 62 years old, an experienced captain, knew that it was the Larchmont's responsibility to get out of the way. So he did nothing. And you can understand that night with the winds gusting, he had to maintain his course, and he knew the Larchmont would have to get out of the way, but Anson didn't budge. Now, here's a fun fact. Earlier in the evening, through the investigation, we learned this. In Narragansett Bay, Anson nearly hit a freight barge in Narragansett Bay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He got too close to it. So he was hot dogging. So it's funny. It's a very Rhode Island story because the captain of the barge that almost got hit by the Larchmont on that fateful night was asked, "Was the Larchmont the boat that nearly hit you?" And he said, "I can't be sure." What's funny about that is this barge captain used to be one of the captains of the Larchmont.
No kidding.
Oh, wow.
So that's when you know Anson was hot dogging. He was young. I describe it like this. Have you ever been on the slow lane of a highway when someone tries to enter the exit to your right?
Yes.
And they don't wait to merge from you. And your human nature is to, well, slow down and let it pass. No, you say she said, "I'm not going to yield." That's very much the Larchmont.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, when the ships got close, it was apparent that they needed to do something. So too late, but finally Anson acts, and he says to Quartermaster Sabers, port the wheel, which meant in those days turning the wheel all the way to the port side, hoping the ship would turn to the starboard side. So to use my hands, the ships were going like this. If they had done nothing, I believe the Larchmont and the Knowlton would have sideswiped each other with little damage. But at the last minute, they port the wheel and the Larchmont turns, and he basically allowing the Knowlton to T-bone the Larchmont.
On the port side, correct?
Correct, just forward of the paddle wheel, just before. So before he did that, when Anson sees he's in trouble because he didn't move, he moved too late, he blows the Larchmont whistle 4 times, the universal distress signal.
Right.
Out from the captain's quarters comes McVeigh. Seeing the Knowlton just a few yards off the bow, he famously yells, "My God, John Anson, what have you done?" Anson didn't respond. He just stood there looking at the Knowlton through his binoculars. Then came the crash. That 2 ships actually stayed stuck together for a few moments till separated by the waves.
So the waves broke them apart, they slid apart, and they didn't have radio communication then, or at least on those ships. And so I understand that the Knowlton initially asked for or signaled for assistance from the Larchmont, but they quickly spread apart, and the Knowlton, I believe, was taken on water.
It was a damage to her bow. It wasn't in as desperate position as the Larchmont, but she and the captain, we can talk about in a little while, did make it to Watch Hill. The problem was with signaling and doing this and saving efforts was the Knowlton struck an absolute bullseye.
Right.
It struck as you said, Jennifer, the port side of the steamship, but it burst open the steam engine and releasing great clouds of steam. And as a bonus, it hit the ship's generator, instantly knocking out all the lights and electricity to the ship. So the engine was dead and the lights were out upon the collision, which was panic. And water was entering the ship at about 1 to 2 feet per minute, slow enough to let the passengers know they were doomed, fast enough to let the passengers know they were doomed, but slow enough to let them think about it for a while. It was the worst of the worst. The ship went down in about 15 minutes, maybe
Which
less.
is insane. And as the water's pouring in, it's hitting the boilers, right? And it's creating all this toxic steam. So a lot of people not only died of hypothermia and frostbite, but of poison that they were inhaling from the steam.
This is why I call it America's most horrific sea disaster. Not the biggest or the most loss of life, but the most horrific. You're right. Passengers in the lower decks drowned, and if they managed to keep their heads above water, they likely were poisoned by the steam or literally scorched to death. Those that made it out of that particular hell were greeted with a new one. Once they got it to the outer decks or the hurricane decks, they were greeted by 0-degree weather, 30-mile-an-hour winds that made it feel as if a fire hose had been cast upon them.
And it's freezing water, and a lot of them didn't have time to get dressed. It was 11 o'clock when I believe this happened, and so a lot of them were in their staterooms at the time, undressed, not ready for the weather at all. So,
correct. It was unimaginable.
Yeah.
Because you literally could. One gentleman took his own life in a lifeboat because half his face was scorched by the scalding steam and the other half was frostbite. Can you imagine?
No,
Absolutely not.
I mean, we were on board our boat a week or 2 ago, staying the night on our 42-foot trawler in St. Petersburg, Florida. Much better climate than up in Rhode Island right now. But we just had a cold front come through. It was windy. It was blowing 15 to 25 knots, and it was cold in our respect here. And in the middle of the night, I heard the knocking outside, and so I went outside in my boxers, my underwear, and it was blowing, and it was probably 57 degrees out, and I thought that was just absolutely awful, and I ran right back inside as soon as I figured out what was going on. So I can't imagine being outside in that same attire, having 40 to 50 mile per hour winds at 0-degree temperature and sea spray with the ship sinking at that very moment as well. That's just
right.
Icing of the human body was almost instant, as was frostbite.
Unbelievable.
And so as it's sinking, the starboard side, right, is listing. Is that what you call it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it's filling up on one side, right? And so it was lifting to the other side as it was sinking, which, the first reaction is to figure out what's going on. Is the boat definitely going to sink, and, deploy life-saving measures at that point? And who was able to get into lifeboats at that time?
So here's where the tragedy takes on a bizarre turn. So McVeigh immediately inspects the damage. He realizes the ship is sinking and orders the lifeboats lowered. However, confusion takes over. Most of the lifeboats were never touched by a crew member. However, because his lifeboat sat right outside the pilot house, McVeigh orders himself and his crew in the lifeboat. His thinking was this: the wall of steam behind him, caused by the collision, couldn't let him find passengers in the stern section of the ship. So he said, I will find more passengers once my own lifeboat's in the water than if I wait and look around the ship. So he gets in the lifeboat and he convinces himself and the crew that went in with him to row around to the starboard side. He's released on the starboard side of the ship, and he wants to row around to the port side, but that was futile. He couldn't row anywhere at
Yeah, I
all.
couldn't imagine.
So obviously the press doesn't accept this explanation at all, and I believe women and children first comes not from the Titanic, it comes from the Larchmont. The press and the people were horrified to find McVeigh in a lifeboat as the ship went down.
Yeah,
Right.
although to himself, he had quite the reasoning to get around the captain goes down with the ship, or is the last one off of the ship. So he was thinking he gets in the lifeboat first with his crew, and they can have a better chance of saving their
Correct.
guests.
I've got a lot of compassion for McVeigh. It's
Yeah.
funny, in those days, the preachers used to publish sermons in the papers, and 9 out of 10 eviscerated him for his cowardice and all this. But one preacher actually said, we shouldn't criticize McVeigh until you imagine yourself in that position and what to do. And he was neither, it's funny, they found him neither commendable nor censorable for his actions. So he made it out, at least in that case, pretty much unscathed. But yeah, it was to the point of suicide. The press eviscerated him.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've been doing a lot of reading because that's just what I do. And my husband is really good with the ship's history, but I have to take a lot of time and study. But I did read many different articles, and I've kept them all so we can, cite them at the end. But there's one where it states that after McVeigh, they were rescued and taken in, he made a statement saying he was the last one to board a lifeboat. And then when Haley comes out and does his interview, and Sadie Golub actually, counteracts that statement. But then in hers, I found she's quoted saying, "Well, I'm not sure if it was him. It was dark, and he was a bigger guy, but I think it was the captain." So it's kind of like, they're all kind of saying different things, but McVeigh did, counteract his statement and say, I did go into my lifeboat first, but with the intention of saving others. And so it's kind of chaotic and all over the place. You don't really know who's telling the truth. Or it was so, I mean, within 15 minutes, the entire ship was underwater. So it's like, how much do you really know?
Yeah.
How much do you really remember that experience when it was, panic? So
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Sadie Golub, the woman I told you about, the young princess, as it were, she actually said McVeigh kept her out of a lifeboat. And one of the Boston papers picked it up that said McVeigh refused her entry into the lifeboat. And fortunately, Harris Feldman, the Navy vet, correctly told the press that was impossible because they were at the stern of the ship. McVeigh was at the bow, and the wall of steam wouldn't let anybody cross. So fortunately, Feldman, in addition to being one of the heroes, saved McVeigh from what could have been a lynching when Sadie Golub said, "He kicked me out of the boat." So you're right, Jennifer. It was he did a noble thing in his own eyes, and he didn't refuse anybody.
Sure, yeah.
And so the Knowlton went ashore to save the vessel because it was sinking. They were able to deploy a lifeboat once they grounded, and I believe there were 7 crew members that were able to.
Very good. So yeah, the Knowlton story is simple. Over the night, they tried to beach her at Watch Hill, Rhode Island, And it was clear by morning that she was taking on water and would sink off the coast. So Captain Haley ordered his 7-member life crew. It was just a basic work ship into a lifeboat. And fortunately, the lifesavers at the Quanaketog Life Saving Station in Charlestown, Rhode Island were ready to assist, and all 7 members of the Knowlton were saved. And
That's
the ship
right.
came aground, and they took pictures of it. And
Can you tell us where the Knowlton was going and what they were carrying?
sure, the Knowlton was going to Everett, Massachusetts, which is basically Boston, home of the same hometown where Captain Haley was from New Jersey, and it was carrying a heavy load of coal. I learned through my presentations that 118 years later now, coal from the Harry Knowlton still washes up on the beaches of Wakefield and Charlestown, Rhode Island, and the dogs in particular like to get it. And I was gifted some of that coal by an audience member. So yes, that's the story of the
That's
schooner
amazing.
Harry Knowlton. She was hauling coal.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Isn't that cool?
That's really cool.
I would love to stumble on a piece of coal next time we're up in the Northeast. That would be.
I'll give you
unbelievable.
one. I've got it. It was gifted to me by the Quanaketog Society. Took me a long time to learn the proper pronunciation of that word, by the way.
I was going to say, I'm glad you were the one to say that first in this interview. That's
We call it Quani. That's what they call it.
Kwani. I love
Yeah.
it. So the crew of the Knowlton didn't think that the Larchmont sustained the amount of damage that it actually did. So they didn't alert anybody right away. Is that correct?
They were helpless. It was just a bunch of guys on a ship that was badly damaged in a storm, and they were trying to survive. So no, they didn't make any action other than that. There was obviously bewilderment. There was anger. Now, there are reports, and it's from Rhode Island sources of captains, that get this, that Captain Haley and the crew were actually down playing poker or having leisure time and actually tied the rudder and the sail during that event and never saw the Larchmont. So you say, geez, is that possible? But then I think you got to say logically, okay, this guy's been on the water for 40 years or so. And that night was horrible. He's in a well-traveled lane. It's gusting up to 50 miles an hour. It's 0 degrees. Is that the time he's going to say, hey, boys, let's just put on automatic pilot and join me downstairs? No, I believe the ship was doing what it was doing, trying to stay on course. And, of course, during the winds, that's tough. And not steering. I believe if Captain Haley steered, it could have been worse.
And so to the east is Block Island, right? So the wind is blowing from the northwest. And so the survivors or the deceased were flowing in the direction of Block Island, right? So they could either be luckily beached on Block Island or they just go straight out into the Atlantic, right?
Correct. If there was any upside to the weather, it blew the bodies, and what lifeboats did get off the ship, about 4 of them, and the hurricane deck, which we'll talk about, and they naturally were drawn to the wind to the bodies, about 50 of them, to the northern tip of Block Island called Sandy Point, although a couple of bodies did end up a week later on Cape Cod.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
At Gayhead. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. And so when was it first known that this tragedy happened? What was the first indication that this occurred, since there wasn't radio or any maydays or anything like that?
News of America's most horrific sea disaster came to the world through the barking of a dog. At sunrise on February 12th, Keeper Littleshield, the keeper of the North Light on Block Island, was awoken at sunrise by his dog barking. Littlefield's eyes popped open. He runs to the door, opens it. Well, first he sees a bloody hand going down the window of his door, and he opens the door only to see a young man crawl across his threshold, soaking wet, yet also amazingly covered in ice. Before this little boy collapses, he says, more coming, more coming. So the dog heard the boy banging on the door, and he was actually a boy who was in the lifeboat who managed to jump out of it at the last moment and swim to the shore amazingly. You could say miraculously, and he alerted Block Island through Keep the Littlefield's lighthouse. And then moments later, an hour later, the whole island was alerted to it, and they were on the scene. But isn't that amazing?
That's an incredible, heart-wrenging story.
Yeah.
And who was the boy?
Yeah. Higersfield was his name. 16-year-old boy named Fred Higersill, who he was a runaway from Germany, and the Providence Journal said Higersill was unusually bright for a boy of that nationality.
Oh, that's
Lovely.
that's a terrible thing to say.
Oh, you find a lot of things in the press. It's hilarious.
Oh my goodness.
So he was the first. And how many were in his lifeboat? And did anyone else survive, or was it just him?
There were 10 people, over 10 people in Fred's lifeboat, and Fred watched all of them freeze to death. One man pulled out a knife and slit his throat ear to ear.
In the lifeboat.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Similarly, Oliver Janvier, 21 of Providence, he found his way to a lifeboat, and he gets in there with 10 men, and before those 10 men froze to death as well, Oliver watched them, the men, take the oars away from him as he tried to save a woman who was drowning.
Oh no.
And he said, Oliver, that the men let the woman drown because it feared she tipped the boat over. So he basically starts dying, young Oliver. He was 21. And he just says, I'm going to collapse. And I'm going to put a oar under my arm. And he collapses on it. And fortunately, it steered him to Sandy Point. He was barely alive when the life-saving station rescuers found him. So Higersill's and Janvier's story, Oliver Janvier, was very similar. Amazing, huh? But the people in the boat, dead, frozen to death.
Wow.
And so that was, you said, around sunrise. So at that point, what was that, 5-6 hours later? Or?
Yeah, well, she went down at 11, as you noted, and this was around 6. Yeah, so
7 hours. Yeah. Wow.
Out in those elements.
It's amazing. The other boat that came ashore was one with Giuseppe Filati, an Italian man. He was in a boat of 20 with some women. I say that because the other 2 boats were all men, sensing a pattern. Yeah. And Velati also had his son Nicola in the boat, who was 25, and he went on to say that he watched Nicola die 1 hour before they reached Sandy Point because he wouldn't move. And Giuseppe Filati was the only survivor in a boat full of 20 people. Oh, and lastly, Captain McVeigh's boat came ashore with the crew members, and they were all alive. They did have one dead Russian man on the boat, and that was the man whose face was half burnt and half frostbitten, and he too killed himself with a knife.
Wow.
But McVeigh and the crew members couldn't walk because of frostbite, so they were carried to the life-saving station.
Yeah.
Now, so different boats pulled up, but did they all have the same dimensions? Like, because some had 9 people, and then you said the other one with Giuseppe had 20?
Most of the lifeboats held 20, but
okay.
Yes, and most of them had almost that, but the one the boys were in were never released. These kids artfully got in the boat as the Larchmont was sinking and hacked away and then invited people in. Because it was chaos, they didn't have time to properly launch.
Yeah.
Wow. And so some of the folks drowned, some of them were suffocated and burned by the steam, correct? Others succumbed to the elements. And then how did any other casualties happen?
So it's probably time best to talk about the hurricane deck.
Okay.
Now, the hurricane deck on a steamship means the upper level, but on the Larchmont, what happened when the Cumberland, when the Cumberland became the Larchmont, the Joy Line Company added a row of 5 cabins on the top of the ship towards the stern. And what those 5 cabins were eventually, as the ship went down, she went down kind of straight. This cabin, a group of 5 cabins, broke off from the ship and had 35 people on top of it. Wow. So look, think of a basketball court, a small basketball court bobbing in the sea, and it had 35 people, including the 8 survivors on it. And almost immediately, they all started freezing to death within an hour. And when you freeze to death, hypothermia, you fall asleep. But amazingly, Harris Feldman and his wife were on that deck, and Feldman, having survived a winter shipwreck on the Black Sea, knew what to do. And he saw his wife was falling asleep, so you know what he did? He started to beat her. Quoting him, "I beat her about the face and the body, not sparing the blows. For 10 minutes, I continued the drubbing until, to my delight, she became awake."
Wow.
So Feldman went to work with the others. There was Sam Lacombe, Sadie Golub, a baker from Providence, and a fellow from New Jersey who was on his way back from a Bible conference in Boston. And there was another crew member. And Feldman started to say he made Sam Gullum take care of Sadie Golub, who had fallen asleep. And it was the same protocol all night. Keep moving. Don't lay down with the dead. Strike one another hard when necessary. 3 times during the night, Sam Lacombe pulled Sadie Golub from the waves as a rogue wave threatened to wash her away. But here's the spot that makes believing this almost impossible. Because Sam Lacombe was awakened by the crash, he didn't have time to dress. When he reaches the hurricane deck, the others were stunned to see a man barefoot and in his underwear. Sam Lacombe spent all night in 0-degree weather, soaking wet, nearly naked, and survived.
That I just
Nearly
don't
12 hours. When people were killing themselves with coats on, after a half hour, Sam, nearly naked, survived 12 hours. I'll tell you what happened to him later.
Now, these are cabins, so are there like blankets and stuff inside the cabin? I'm not really sure what a hurricane deck is.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture. So it is basically the part of the ship. They were on the roof of the hurricane deck. And because of that, it was just think of a big rectangular board. And so they didn't have any, I thought I had a quick picture of it. They didn't
We
have
can
any.
put one in when we edit the video.
There's a hurricane deck.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. So they were on the top.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 35 people gathered on that thing, and some of them were frozen and stuck to it. But these people stayed alive by hitting each other and keep moving and talking to one another. It's incredible. It's a miracle.
Quite a tactic. That's amazing.
Survival skills.
It's fun to see the audience faces when I describe Harris Feldman's secret of saving his wife. They all chuckle.
It's pretty fun.
Taking out some frustration and saving at the same time.
Where's the downside, right?
Right?
And so they didn't land on Block Island, though. They were out to sea beyond Block Island, out in the Atlantic, right?
Very good, Butch. How I describe it is this. The wind took all the dead bodies and the lifeboats towards the northern tip of Block Island, Sandy Point. However, the hurricane deck, in the morning, just like the lifeboats, starts drifting towards Sandy Point. So Harris Feldman rips a shirt off a dead passenger, waves it frantically, knowing they're coming to shore. Except things weren't right. The hurricane deck doesn't come ashore. It passes Block Island and starts to drift to the open sea. All hope is lost. And then a hero boat, a fishing schooner called the Elsie, who was out on retrieving dead bodies as part of the Block Island response team. This fishing schooner sees the hurricane deck and rescues the passengers. It's incredible.
That's incredible.
Wow. That's what a turn of events. I mean, just the devastation they must have felt passing Block Island, thinking they're saved, and now they're going out to no man's land. And fortunately, a good Samaritan-driven ship came and saved them.
Yeah, and interestingly, I don't have this in my presentation, but Harris Feldman had given up, and we know that because somewhat incredibly, after 12 hours on a raft in frostbite and frozen, he somehow manages to pull out a cigar from his inner shirt and lights it and smokes it because he says, "We are now done."
Oh, no.
And then they see the Elsie breaking through the fog.
Wow.
Now, who was on the Elsie, and how did the Elsie, were they out searching for them, or were they just a ship passing by?
It is a famous ship that you will know if you spend more time on Block Island. It was Captain Smith. It was the Smith family. It was a fishing schooner, and it contained 3 of his nephews on board, and they were just out looking for bodies. They'd already retrieved bodies. It was about 11 a.m. on Tuesday rather, and they had decided to go in because they were in danger. They too were frostbitten. Their ship was icing up, and they were collecting dead bodies, and then one of the young Smith boys sees the hurricane deck, and he says very famously, "Captain, wreckage ahead, dead bodies ahead, our work's not over." And then as they get closer to the hurricane, the boy becomes hysterical. "Captain, uncle, they're alive."
Oh,
And the other said, "You're going to be crazy. You couldn't make it a half hour on that damn thing." But there were people alive and moving on the hurricane deck, thanks to Harris Feldman. So the Elsie in 20-foot waves has to release the little rowboat to get out there one at a time. Guess who's last off the hurricane deck?
Sam
Harris
Lacombe.
Feldman.
Feldman. He's a real hero in this story. I mean,
Feldman is, yes.
absolutely.
Sam Lacombe is, when they saw Sam Lacombe, they wondered how he could be alive.
Yeah.
So all
And
the passengers are brought back to Block Island.
Days, I think.
I'll tell you the story now. So Sam Lacombe comes back. The survivors are placed in one of the life-saving stations, and they're going to go overnight. They're ordered by Champlin of the resort you stayed in, Jennifer. Dr. Champlin takes over on the crisis scenes, and he orders the bodies of the dead and the living to remain overnight on Block Island for inspection. Meanwhile, Joyline Company sends a ship called the Kentucky to go bring the passengers and the survivors, rather, to Rhode Island Hospital. Block Island doesn't have a hospital. So Champlin refuses the survivors to be taken to the hospital. He orders them overnight on Block Island. So the Coast Guardsmen of the day convinced Champlin to let them at least go on the Kentucky to make use of her warm beds, and they do. So they get in a longboat, and they're shuttled out into the Kentucky for their mandatory overnight stay. And that's where we get a picture of Sam Lacombe, which I'll forward.
Yes.
And but the problem is on Tuesday night, their bodies stop defrosting, and that's where the trauma comes in.
Oh, I
So
can
one
imagine
day
the
later-
pain and discomfort.
One day later, they allow the steamer to steam to the Kentucky to steam to Providence, and they're taken to Rhode Island Hospital. Sam Lacombe, when he is examined by the doctors, leaves them gasping. One doctor said, "Impossible." Sam's arms, hands, legs, and trunk were frozen, and said one doctor to a press reporter, even the kid's back was frozen.
Ay, ay, ay.
Sam lingered for 2 days before dying on February 14th, Valentine's Day.
I'm going to celebrate him moving forward instead of Valentine's Day.
Providence Journal celebrated Sam by publishing the whole of Henley's poem Invictus, which reads, "Though black is the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul." And in my presentation, I call Sam the unconquerable soul. It's a miracle. He stayed alive for Sadie Gollum.
That's amazing. Now, are we able to get a hold of Barnum and Bailey? Is that who he worked for? So they have to have some sort of record of him, right?
You know, that is just a little quip in the newspapers, the Boston, the Providence newspapers. Finding records outside of the press reports has been very, very difficult. So I've not explored that. I embellished that a little. I call him an acrobat. We don't really know what he was doing, but I think his physicality. I have another theory about that. In 1907, Rhode Island built Vanity Fair, the first of its type Disney World, and they had a live role play, kind of like Cirque du Soleil, where they put a brick building on fire, and then acrobats would come in and out of the building. And I believe Sam was auditioning for a role in that production at Vanity Fair in East Providence, but I can't prove it.
Oh, wow.
Well, we do have quite a bit of, followers and listeners. So if anybody's out there and knows anything about the history of this, please let us know. Leave a comment, contact us via our website or Daniel.
Please, and you'll have
directly.
my QR code. So now you get the rub of why I'm into this. When I saw a picture of Lacombe, I said, that's amazing. This guy was actor quality handsome. Sadie Golub was beautiful. So you see where this
Beautiful.
is going. You have a beautiful young Jewish girl and this French Canadian rock star from New Hampshire spending 12 hours on a raft surviving each other. And if you look at their pictures together, they're Hollywood beautiful. And my instant thought was, this makes the fictitious Jack and Rose of Titanic look like
Yeah.
a joke. And my conviction was this story is more incredible than Titanic. So my byline is this. Larchmont makes Titanic look like a Disney cartoon for some of the reasons we've been saying. And you can't separate Lacombe and his saving of Golub and Harris Feldman take care of the girl. He succeeds. In fact, so when I call him unconquerable, you say, well, no, death got Lacombe 2 days later. Yes, but it should have got him in 20 minutes. But you see, death was after Sadie, and Sadie survived the tragedy and lived to be 64. So Sam Lacombe kept death away from Sadie.
He did. That's incredible.
That's remarkable. And you mentioned the Titanic, and when you look up Larchmont disaster, you see the headline, Larchmont, New England's Titanic. And so, and yeah, that's what you'll be seeing regularly when you Google this story. And as you mentioned, the Larchmont disaster makes the Titanic sinking look like a Disney cruise because, yeah, it was a larger ship. More guests were lost at sea or succumbed to for whatever reason, but they had clear conditions as well. But it was a little bit warmer. It was near freezing, not zero, and it wasn't blowing 40 to 50 miles per hour, and they had radio communications at that time. So the Titanic was able to contact other ships nearby, which I think the Carpathia was the one that came and saved a lot of the passengers aboard the Titanic.
And it also was, the Larchmont was under 20 minutes. Multiple stories say 12 minutes to 15 minutes.
It's about right.
And the Titanic, 2 hours?
Yeah, I can't remember.
I think the Titanic was somewhere around 2 hours to officially go fully under. But
if Harris Feldman was on the Titanic, he would have had all of third class saved. He would have ripped the doors off the walls, fashioned them to life rafts, and had hors d'oeuvres on them. That's just kind of. But here's the reason why Larchmont is more important, but related to Titanic. Remember the Salvation Army girls I told you about?
Yeah.
As the Larchmont sank, the captains told the girls, Anna Ruberg and Helga Helgren said, don't save yourself or tend to the passengers. And we have an account where Sadie Golub was in shock on the ship when a woman came up to her and placed a life preserver around her. That was one of the Salvation Army women. But more incredibly, as the ship sank, the Salvation Army, the 10 Salvationists, 7 of which were women, held hands, sang hymns, and implored people to make peace with God after they had helped get everybody in the lifeboats to the best of their ability.
Wow.
So they sang, Nearer My God to Thee, 5 years before the people of the Titanic did it. And I'm convinced, because you'll remember, Salvation Army is a British organization, that Ava Booth, the head of the Salvation Army, when she gave her sermon at Carnegie Hall in New York City, where 15,000 people waited outside, the largest crowd ever to assemble there to honor the Salvation Army lost on the Titanic, that it was broadcast all over England. So I believe very much so that the musicians who went down with the Titanic said to themselves, or very literally, let us remember the ladies of the Larchmont. So I say this. Larchmont is not Rhode Island's Titanic. Titanic is Europe's Larchmont.
Well said.
Well said. This story is incredible. And so I don't think we've covered how many people actually went down with the Larchmont.
Yes, you will never know. So the passenger list went down with the ship, and that was one of the things that would, in the aftermath, change. Ships would forever be required to keep passenger lists separate from the vessel. They usually carried 400 people on that ship, maybe even more if they could, but that night there was probably 250. Official reports say, as you probably know, Jennifer, from your sleuthing, that there was probably 140 to 160 people killed. However, we know that Staples, I'm going to try to find it here on my slide, on
James
his
Staples, the
deathbed in the
quartermaster.
1950s, um, Quartermaster James Staples confessed that no less than 332 people were on board that night. He counted them all, which would make it Rhode Island's worst maritime disaster.
Wow. That's amazing. And yeah, being on a boat, that's the first thing you need to know is how many passengers are on board your vessel, so that if there is an emergency on board and you're calling out a mayday, the first thing you do is say what the boat is, what it looks like, how many passengers are on board, so they know how many they need to look for.
That's news to me. So we live on a boat sometimes, so I need to learn these things.
So the Larchmont is now a main reason why passenger manifests are given to an entity on land in addition to on board.
Correct. And I believe women and children first, and the tale of McVeigh impacted the industry heavily too, and may have. The Titanic overshadows everything. 5 years later, it became the disaster du jour for obvious reasons. But you've got to remember, in these days, steamship sinking was very common. There was no radar. There was fog. Steamships, train wrecks, it was nuts, and people were kind of used to this. So that's why the Larchmont kind of disappeared.
Wow. That's amazing. And I even read there was another collision off of Nantucket a couple of years later, I believe, with a ship aptly named the Florida, which was, I think, an Italian liner. And can't remember where the other one was from, but it was called the Republic. And they even collided off of
And also,
Nantucket.
Yep, famous one was called the Portland 2, which went down the storm. And I'm often asked about these, and I'm like, I'm just a Larchmont guy. I was haunted by one ship. But yeah.
You're much more than that, Daniel.
Your point, Butch. Yeah.
I also started reading into the life-saving stations, and when the first one came about, and then the one on Watch Hill, and then all the different disasters that were happening, and all the life-saving stations were in the beginning all volunteer men, and
Yes.
then they came out, and they were making like $15 or $50 a month, I believe, some of them, and they had like 7 to 10 crew members between volunteers and staff. But there's this really incredible timeline in location area, which I think would look good on a map. We'll do something, but where the life-saving stations popped up and why and what created the need in those areas. So I'd like to do that after the fact, but I wish I had more info on it so we can discuss it. But
Yeah, it's a whole nother genre. And the men, they were called surf men in those days, and they
Surfmen, yeah.
and they predate our Coast Guard's men and women. But yes, these were the heroes, and these stations were beautiful. They shared an architectural language. So yeah, there's a great, robust, and often a good following for that genre of history, and it's a noble effort, Jennifer.
Maybe we'll do a bonus video and we'll talk about it.
We have to talk about the conclusion, how I conclude,
Oh, yeah.
and it's based on the superstition of the Larchmont. And so what I say is that in 1925, 18 years after the ship sank, a ship out of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, called the Mackinac, it's actually called Mackinac, but in Rhode Island we call it Mackinac, was on its way to Newport for an outing. It steamed down to Newport, Rhode Island for the employees of a textile company called J.P. Coates. It has women and children, 700 of them on their way. However, on the way back, on that day in August of 1925, the boiler exploded, filling the ship with steam and killing 55 people. One little girl memorably said, holding up her burnt, scald hands, "Somebody blow on them, for they hurt me so."
Oh,
Resting
don't tell me this.
resting in the captain's quarters at the time of the blast was 45-year-old Captain George McVeigh of
Oh, wow.
Providence, Rhode Island.
He went on to captain another ship, another vessel.
That killed 55 people.
Oh my good. I think that the superstition and the hoodoo is just following him around at this point between
So
the
here's how I
Tremont?
sum it up. McVeigh was found not responsible for a faulty boiler repair that caused the explosion on the Mackinac. He had nothing to do with that. He was not at the helm of the Larchmont when it struck the Knowlton. Pilot Anson was. And he had nothing to do with the kitchen fire that started the circus lion's death on the Tremont. In fact, he was a hero there. But nevertheless, the Steamship Inspection Service found that McVeigh would never again skipper a ship that contained human beings.
Wow.
Thus, you conclude after the Mackinac that superstition weighed heavily in their decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're on a cruise and the captain says, "Hi, I'm George McVeigh," be forewarned.
Yeah. Yeah. George McVeigh, the fourth or fifth or sixth. Yeah. Be careful.
Isn't that incredible?
That's incredible.
That's
Oh, I have to tell you that yesterday after our conversation, so we went out to dinner and I checked the mail on the way out, and I just received a letter last night from the Block Island Historical Society, because I'd signed up for their emails and letters for donations and things like that. And you are on their lineup of upcoming events and shows on Block Island on
26.
June 26th. If anyone is
Got
near
a call.
Block Island,
It was probably from Janet, right? Oh boy, that's
yeah. So if anyone's on Block Island or near Block Island or has been wanting to visit, Daniel Harrington himself will actually be on Block Island the last week of June, and he will be giving his famous Larchmont presentation at the Historical Society. So please
And I
join
will
us.
plug
and
the
him.
presentation, not myself and my horrible accent or forced charisma, but I'm proud of the PowerPoint presentation because we've taken time to restore photos, and it's a visual delight. There's not much on the Larchmont out there, but if you press, you can find it in microfilm and things. So I'm really impressed with the visuals we've been able to come up with and put the pieces of the story together against the beautiful backdrop of Block Island, right?
oh
Yeah. Oh,
we fell in love with Block Island.
we're
It's
obsessed.
gorgeous.
He's actually wearing a Yellow Kittens Tavern shirt,
Oh,
which
Yellow
he-
Kitty.
and we took the
Eddie's
ferry
never
over.
been there. As a young
We
man.
had we fell in love with that beautiful place, and we actually were there the first week in June, so right before season started. And we just posted a video on our YouTube channel about that trip, so if anyone wants to see that, you can go to our channel and watch it. Rafa, hello, he was so catering to us over at Champlin's Resort, and it was a beautiful time.
Yeah, and we hope to go there by boat one day. So we flew up there and took the ferry over from Point Judith, but hopefully sometime we'll take our own vessel up there and be in the mooring field and Great Salt Pond and enjoy it from that aspect.
Yeah.
But beautiful place. And Dan, thanks so much for joining us and doing everything that you've done to make sure the Larchmont was not lost in everybody's minds. And it's an amazing story and everybody should learn about it. So we really appreciate people like you that have done all of the research and gone out and given the presentations to inform others about it, because it's an incredible story.
Well, let me return the compliment. I've done a couple of interviews so far, and to be interviewed by the two of you with the nautical experience, but also the research, you've done your homework and asking me the appropriate questions, and it's been easy and fun to do this, and I think you've hit on all the good points. So you have a talent for this, and I thank you for being in another region, telling this story. I think I was telling you the other night, I started calling this Rhode Island's most horrific sea disaster, graduated up to New England's most historic sea disaster. And now I see that story is so big with its oddities, superstitions, and miracles that it is indeed America's most horrific sea disaster. And it deserves to be told for the heroism of Feldman, the others, and the Salvationists alone. So thank you for being part of that, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very well said. And for those of you that are watching and listening, definitely check out Daniel's presentations. Dan, where can they find your information and be able to communicate with you?
Yeah, so my website is meant to be user-friendly. It's called larchmontremembered.com. I'll have a QR code here for you, larchmontremembered.com. And you can go on there and there's a link to contact me. There's my personal reach out information by phone and mail. And you can get some information about the show, where it's showing around New England. And it's pretty self-explanatory. Larchmont Remembered. I should have came up with a better name, like the Larchmont Adventure or something, but I'd stick with Larchmont Remembered. It's done me well.
I think it's pretty fitting. And we'll have a link to Larchmont Remembered below in the description. And of course, you can email us or Dan if you have any questions, and we'll make sure we do our best to answer them and connect you the best we can.
That's right.
Very good.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's a pleasure. And hopefully we'll be seeing you in person in June up in Block Island.
Yeah, we're going to try and make our way to Block Island again. So
I look forward to that, and let's hope it's not 0 degrees.
Oh, yeah. I think we should be safe in June, hopefully.
I think so too.
Thank you, Daniel. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dan.
Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.